Okay, hello. It's been a long time since I have done a video podcast. I am freshly showered, wash and go, and I'm actually sitting at my altar, which I won't show just because it feels very sacred. Um, I wanted to record this podcast. Well, really, I wanted to record a voice note. Don't mind the automatic feeder that just went off for my cats. I really wanted to record a memo for myself yesterday, just to get into like the raw emotions of how I feel about another transition in my life that has happened. It just happened last night, but I decided that I would sleep on it, see how I feel, maybe collect my thoughts, and most importantly, bring it to my altar. So I'm also going to end up pulling a card during this podcast. But I guess for starters, I can kind of tell you what's going on. By the way, this is my new favorite shirt. If you are watching on Spotify video, I got this from a wonderful shop, bookshop, romance bookshop near my home at an open mic night yesterday, and I just think it's so cute. It says greetings from the cottage, and I just love my little cottage that I'm currently in. So I just thought that I would premiere this new t-shirt of mine that is now my favorite. Okay, anyways, on to business. So yesterday I got out of the relationship that I was in. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's the intimate relationship that I referred to a few episodes ago. If you just scroll back a bit, I had featured that person a couple of times on my podcast. And I don't want to talk about specifically what happened to cause the transition of that relationship. I more so wanted to use this podcast to talk about just the way that I have grown in the arc of like how I've dealt with relationship separations, intimate as well as platonic, over the years, because I've noticed that this time around I am handling it much better than my best in the past. Like, I have gone into a new level, and I think there's a couple of reasons why that's happening. But the way that I feel in this moment is like organic is the best way that I can describe my current state of mind, my current feelings. Like, I feel like things happened very organically in the way that they ended. I felt like it was time. I felt like, the decision was very much so like right there in my face. And if I had made any other decision, it would have been another self-betrayal. And so even though I do believe that I wouldn't say that I betrayed myself throughout the relationship, because I feel like that's I knew what I was doing in the sense of like overlooking things that I knew weren't right. But there were times, many times in that relationship where I knew that this moment was going to come. I knew that this moment was going to come, and it had even I got to a place pretty early on in that relationship where I figured out that like on a personal level, I just know that I don't have a desire to get married. That's Moomin. Moomin, I'm recording. Anyways, I had got to a place in my life where I didn't want to get married. I think just like being in that dynamic really revealed to me some of the things that I do and no longer desire. But I also knew that I wasn't going to marry or potentially consider doing that with that particular partner if I even were to change my mind, because like internally I knew that there were just certain aspects about our dynamic and things that I didn't understand. Excuse me. That Moomin is such a rude. My cats, I really need to work on home training with my cats because they just don't have no home training. But yeah, there were just aspects about that relationship that I knew long term I wasn't going to want to deal with. And just, I guess, like the value for me in that was just like the convenience of intimacy in the meantime. It's really difficult to find viable partners. At least it has been very difficult for me to find viable partners. I would even venture to say that um, I've never really found like a truly good fit for me, like in all of my dating history. Like there's always been some kind of compromise that wasn't just like, your average compromise of nobody's going to be perfect, but a compromise that kind of unsettled me in a way that made me know like this is straying me away from like the core of who I am. Um, and that was true in this most recent experience as well. So I just feel like, again, very organically, I think this has dissolved. And because it was so organic and because I knew, like I mentioned, that it was probably going to come to this, I don't feel heartbroken like I have in the past. And I think a lot of that heartbreak of past relationships had come from me desiring partnership more so than I desired that partner. And when the partnership dissolved, it would put me in a space of just feeling so sad that the institution itself didn't work, that I didn't really care whether or not that was just not the right person for me. I just wanted that institution to work because I wanted to, project my life or, progress my life in that direction of like companionship and partnership and growth. And so, like I said, knowing that that's not necessarily my intention anymore, like I said, I have no desire to get married again. I do desire partnership, but I think in a more untraditional way. Like, I don't necessarily want to live full time with anyone ever again. Not that we did, but like I said, that dynamic was part of what was convenient for me, was that, we didn't live together, and it was just like very much so something that felt like an addition to my life, but not necessarily a central part of my life. So I would want that sort of dynamic again, in the sense of like knowing that at the core of who I am, like I am someone who really thrives with like self-sufficiency, but and space, but not to the extent that like I would never want to date again, or I would never want to, have a romantic interest again. It would just look a little different than I thought it would look in my 20s when, I wanted the traditional style of relationship. So here are some of the things that I think contributed to me dealing with this separation a bit better than I have in the past. I think a lot of how I felt before was centered around like spiritual divine timing and like wanting to spiritualize relational connections. And I think that that's half true, in the sense of, yeah, I think people do come into your life for a reason, and I think they do teach you lessons, and I think that it's okay to be in community with someone even if it's not supposed to be forever. But on the other hand, I would get upset when that person's season was up and just feel like it was just a cruel trick that God or the universe was playing on me to bring people into my life that I get connected to, only for them to be removed later, or I discover things about them that no longer align with my values, etc., etc. And I've come to a place in my life where I no longer feel that way. I don't feel like the universe is playing a cruel joke on me when things are presented that don't necessarily align with me. And I say that because I can take accountability in a way that I haven't in the past, with ignoring the signs that that person probably isn't going to be a good long-term fit. I would always sort of view maladaptive relationships as just part of the journey of learning to compromise with people and give people grace, and all of that stuff is great and that's fine, but there's a difference between giving grace to someone who you know is like right for you, whether that be a friend, whether that be a coworker, whether that be an intimate partner, and giving grace to someone who's showing you like legitimate red flags that are just non-negotiables for you. And so I know that I have been shown signs that were non-negotiables for me throughout the course of this last experience. And I deliberately made the decision to ignore them because I wanted to just experience the positive and appreciate the positive. I'm not sure if I talked about that on this podcast, but that was my mindset. It was like, okay, as long as this person isn't abusing me or, really putting me in like a difficult space, emotionally, physically, whatever, I'm just going to ride the wave and like laugh and have fun and like enjoy all of the juicy fun parts and ignore like, eat the meat, spit out the bone kind of thing. But I acknowledge now, after having gone through that experience and conscientiously making that decision, right? Like I used to make decisions to like eat the meat, spit out the bone, but I used to pretend like there were no bones and then get upset when I choked. And so going through this last experience and knowing that my decision was to intentionally ignore the bones that I knew existed, I can move forward knowing that like we're not doing no more bones, not the type of bones that'll make me choke, that's just not, because I know indefinitely it's not going to work. It's like, yeah, cool, we have fun for this amount of time, but then it's ultimately going to end. So what's the point? So that's kind of like something that I've definitely learned and I will take moving forward. I think that in some ways, the way that I conducted my analysis of this last experience during that time was in some ways experimental, because I wanted to know like what happens when I like allow a relationship to stay on the shallow surface versus like trying to go so deep with somebody and then turn around and, it just blows up in your face. And then now you have all of these huge emotions because you went too deep with someone that, was giving you signs that they were someone to stick on the shallow surface. So it was experimental. And yeah, I think that the results of that experiment were, it's like I said, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it for me to give myself, it's not worth it for me to give myself an opportunity to prolong an indefinite or a definite ending. Indefinite in the sense of, I'm not sure when it's going to end, but knowing like going in that it's not going to last. So yeah, definitely learned that. I think that moving forward, I have decided that when things start not making sense, I'm not going to try to make it make sense. I'm not going to just say, oh, well, maybe just over time it'll start to come together and like this will make, I think that's great when it comes to life, right? But I think when it comes to, for me, meeting people, when there's things about a person that just don't add up, that's just my sign of like, I'm not going to squeeze my brain into trying to figure out what just doesn't make any logical sense to me. I'm just not going to do it because it's a lot of effort for me. And 9 times out of 10, it doesn't come with a lot of reward. So yeah, I'm doing good. I'm doing fine. I appreciate the experience for what it was and what it taught me. Yeah, I think that it ended very maturely. There was no, yelling or screaming or bickering or nothing. It was just very like, okay, this is the end. And so I can appreciate that as well. I think in a lot of my former breakups, it's been really like unfinished, I guess I can say. But this one feels very final in the sense that, like I said, there were no words left unspoken. So, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and pull a card. I was going to light some candles, but I think I will forego that because I've got the fan going. But yeah, I will pull a card. Let's see which deck I want to do. We've got the Mother Peace deck. Maybe I will pull for the Mother Peace. I feel like I might want to pull 2 cards. So maybe we'll do Messages from Angels and the Mother Peace deck. So as I am shuffling, moving forward, I am not in a space where like I am open to looking for another relationship, romantic relationship. Not interested in dating anyone like in this period of being very much so new to renegotiating just where I am in that season of life. But when I am ready, because I will be ready again, I am flirting with the idea of really prolonging the dating stage and the getting to know a person journey. You know, I think in the past, like if I wanted to date a person, we would go on dates, we would get to know each other that way and then figure out like, you know, is it a good fit? But I think I'm in a space now where I really want to like get to know a person for a whole year, because I was dating that person for a whole year, and now that the year is up, there have been signs along the way, mind you, but it took like about a full year for me to really get the full picture of how like that just wasn't going to work for me. And so I know that's kind of like drastic, you know, if you feel like you're interested in someone and you take time to like befriend them for a year before you want to even go into the realm of dating them. But I feel like honestly that's just where I'm at, because ultimately, like if it's meant to be, it's going to be. And I don't think that a year is going to stop the person who is meant for you from still being for you after that year is up. And you hear stories all the time about how people are friends for years and then they're able to date, and then that's the person that you know, they end up with. So yeah, I think that that's kind of my approach moving forward. All right, let's do these cards. So I got the number 7 card, which is the Chariot. And then I also got the Patience card for the Angels and Ancestors deck. So the Patience card says, now is the time to learn, study, and gather information. Enjoy being a student, because in the future, you will synthesize your knowledge into action. I think that's pretty fair. That's probably like where I am right now. Yeah, I'm in a space of like being very patient with myself, not being so hard on myself for the decisions that I have made that didn't necessarily align with my greatest good. Yeah, not bullying myself into feeling like I should have done better by this time and this, that, and the third. It's just, you know, just a learning experience, and that's fine. And so let's look at the Chariot card. I know that this is a good card. Anything in the major arcana generally signifies like pretty significant meanings that I tend to find usually positive. Okay, so the Chariot represents a vehicle under control, the Amazon consciousness that allows a person to take charge of her own life and make her own decisions, agreements, and responses. The Chariot signifies a winner, the charioteer, a victorious warrior, self-disciplined and firmly grounded on the physical plane. Yeah, I think that's pretty much spot on. I do feel like the winner. I do feel like a winner. in the sense that like I chose to do what I knew was right. I definitely feel very much so in control of myself and the decisions that I make and have made in this instance. And yeah, I think that moving forward, I'm just happy that I can sort of use this as a bit of a barometer to show just how far I've come. So I'm going to leave it at that for today. I'm hungry, so I'm going to go get some breakfast. But I hope you enjoyed this video episode. Thanks for listening, as always, and see you next time. Say bye, Moomin. Bye-bye.